Welcome back to another quiet journey through the slower corners of history. Tonight, we'll wander together into a place that was once the center of life, gossip, trade, and survival, the medieval marketplace. Before we begin, don't forget to leave a like on this video, subscribe if you enjoy calm explorations of the past, and tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching tonight? Ready? Let's get going. The early morning in a medieval town always begins with a quiet, almost sacred hesitation. Narrow streets, paved with uneven stones, gradually fill with the sounds of a city waking. The toll of the nearby church bells spreads over the rooftops, mingling with the muffled steps of passers-by hurrying about their tasks. From village blacksmiths to nuns carrying baskets of food, all move with a slow and deliberate rhythm. The smell of freshly baked bread, still warm from the oven, drifts through the streets, penetrating even the narrowest alleys. Mixed with it, a sense of salted fish, cured meats, and fresh herbs, creating a bouquet that is at once invigorating and calm. Passing wooden stalls, one begins to notice the first signs of trade. Vegetables neatly arranged on tables, clay jugs filled with milk, baskets of apples and pears, and behind them, with soft yet insistent voices, traders inviting the first buyers. Everything feels almost theatrical. People and goods, movements and sounds coming together in a slow, contemplative performance. The prologue leaves the impression that you are not just a spectator. You are gradually becoming part of this rhythm. The wind, slipping between the houses, carries whispers of the old town and the promise of the day ahead. A day of trade, encounters, small worries, and large stories. Chapter 1. The medieval town and its market. In the heart of a medieval town, the marketplace was more than a place to buy and sell goods. It was the lifeblood of daily existence, the center around which the rhythms of town life turned. To understand the market, one must first picture the town itself. Clustered houses with timber frames and thatched roofs, streets winding in irregular patterns, and a church or castle often dominating the skyline. These were not the neatly planned grids of modern cities. Each alley and square had grown organically over decades, shaped by the needs and whims of its inhabitants. Yet within this seeming disorder, there existed a purposeful organization, particularly where trade was concerned. The market square, or the open space designated for commerce, was typically a broad, flat area in the center of town, often near the main church or the Lord's castle. Its position was deliberate. Accessibility mattered. Merchants and farmers had to be able to bring their goods into the town without too much difficulty, and townsfolk needed a convenient place to purchase daily necessities. On some days, the square might be little more than a stretch of cobblestones. On others, especially during annual fairs, it could become a bustling spectacle, overflowing with tents, carts, and makeshift stalls stretching as far as the eye could see. It was in these squares that the rhythm of medieval commerce was most visible. The morning light would touch the tops of tents and awnings first, signaling the start of another day. Farmers and craftsmen would arrive with their wares, often carrying them from nearby villages, sometimes from dozens of miles away. Horses and oxen might drag carts filled with sacks of grain, barrels of ale, or bundles of cloth. The air was filled with the quiet shuffle of hooves and the creak of wooden wheels over cobbles, a sound that became part of the town's morning chorus. Many markets were not permanent fixtures in the way modern supermarkets are, but rather recurring events. Weekly markets were the norm, held on a specific day when the local community expected them. While grand fairs might occur only once or twice a year, These fairs were extraordinary occasions, attracting merchants from distant towns, sometimes even foreign lands. They offered not only the practical exchange of goods, but also a rare glimpse of items otherwise unavailable. Spices from the East, fine cloth from distant cities, and exotic curiosities that fueled the imagination. Within the town itself, the layout of streets often reflected the market's centrality. Major thoroughfares would converge on the square, allowing for the easy movement of carts and people. Side streets were narrower, lined with houses that often doubled as workshops or storage spaces for local craftsmen. These lanes led directly into the bustle of the square, ensuring that almost every resident passed through the market at some point during the day. Even for those whose work was not tied to trade, the market remained a place to catch news, exchange gossip, and witness the passing parade of town life. It is important to remember that medieval towns were small by modern standards, but densely populated. A few hundred to a few thousand souls might live within the protective walls, and each one relied on the market for sustenance and supplies. Townspeople were generally responsible for their own food, clothing, and basic household needs. Even simple items like a knife, a pot, or a spool of thread were not taken for granted. The market square was, therefore, a place of necessity, but it was also one of social cohesion, where obligations, relationships, and reputations were negotiated along with prices. Markets were usually regulated by the town's authorities. This regulation was subtle but significant. Specific spaces were allotted to certain trades. Measures and weights were enforced to ensure fair exchange, and rules were established to maintain order. For instance, butchers might be restricted to one area, while bakers occupied another. Fishmongers, who often arrived with delicate and perishable goods, were assigned spaces closer to running water if possible. These arrangements reduced conflict and encouraged an organized flow of people, animals, and goods, even in the apparent chaos of the busiest days. The town's relationship to its surrounding countryside also shaped the market. Farmers brought produce, eggs, milk, and cheese from their fields, and craftsmen offered tools, shoes, and household goods that rural families could not make themselves. In turn, townsfolk provided services, refined goods, and luxury items to the countryside. This interplay was vital. The market was not merely a place for urban dwellers, but a hub for the wider region, connecting village and town in a network of exchange that sustained both. Architecture played a subtle role in defining the market's character. Buildings around the square might include timber-framed houses with overhanging upper stories, stone structures for wealthier merchants, and open arcades for small traders. Some towns boasted covered market halls, where stalls could operate protected from rain or harsh sun. These spaces allowed for a continuity of trade, even in inclement weather, and offered a sheltered environment where delicate or expensive goods could be displayed with care. At the edges of the market square, one could often find the town's most prominent symbols. The church tower, with its bells calling worshippers to prayer and marking the passage of time, and the Lord's castle, asserting authority and providing a sense of protection. These structures frame the square, both visually and symbolically, reminding townspeople that trade occurred within a structured social and political order. The market was lively, yet it operated under watchful eyes, a blend of freedom and oversight that defined medieval urban life. The market square also served as a stage for ritual and celebration. Public announcements, proclamations, and punishments might be displayed in the very space where goods were sold. Fairs often coincided with religious festivals, allowing townspeople to combine spiritual observance with economic activity. This overlap of commerce and community life ensured that the market was never merely a transactional space. It was embedded in the rhythms of everyday life, linking the practical, the social, and the symbolic. Even the timing of the market day was carefully considered. Early morning, before the sun had fully risen, was reserved for setup, allowing merchants to prepare their goods and attract the first buyers. By mid-morning, the square was at its busiest, with the hum of conversation, the shuffle of feet, and the occasional clatter of dropped coins filling the air. Afternoon brought a slight lull as townsfolk attended to other tasks, and by evening, the market gradually emptied, leaving behind traces of straw, spilled grain, and the lingering smells of food and animals. In short, to set the scene of a medieval town and its market is to envision a space alive with practical purpose, social interaction, and sensory detail. It is a place where the architecture, streets, and authorities shape the flow of trade, where farmers, craftsmen, and townspeople meet in daily negotiation, and where the rhythm of life is punctuated by the arrival of merchants, the ringing of bells, and the turning of seasons. The market is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary in its function as a place to buy and sell, extraordinary in the richness of experience it provides to those who live within its orbit. By the time one steps fully into the bustle of the marketplace, the stage is set. The town, the streets, the regulatory frameworks, and the surrounding countryside have all prepared the way. The trader with his wares, the farmer with her baskets, and the townspeople with their lists of needs and desires are ready to engage in the dance of medieval commerce. Each morning, the marketplace comes alive in a rhythm that has endured for generations, a heartbeat of the town that will continue as long as people gather to exchange goods, services, and stories. Chapter 2: Stalls, Booths, and the Layout of Commerce. As one steps further into the heart of a medieval marketplace, the first thing to notice is not the goods themselves, but the very structure of commerce. The stalls, booths, and temporary constructions that shape the flow of trade. Unlike modern stores, which are permanent and often standardized, the medieval market was a patchwork of wooden frames, canvas awnings, and makeshift tables. These arrangements were as much a part of the market's character as the merchants and buyers themselves. Each stall had its own personality, reflecting the trader's resources, the type of goods on offer, and even local traditions of display. Most stalls were simple, functional structures. Timber frames, roughly hewn and bound with wooden pegs or rope, formed the skeleton, while cloth or oiled canvas might serve as a roof or side covering. These coverings protected both merchant and merchandise from sun, rain, and dust, and the choice of color could indicate the nature of the goods or simply the aesthetic preference of the trader. For example, bright cloth might advertise textiles or clothing, while the plain coverings of a butcher's stall emphasized the practical over the decorative. Beneath the roof, wooden boards or planks created tables, elevated slightly above the ground, on which goods were arranged with care, or sometimes in a haphazard fashion, depending on the seller's personality. The layout of the marketplace was rarely haphazard. Town authorities, aware that disorder could lead to confusion, theft, or disputes, often imposed a careful organization. Butchers were generally placed in one area, close to water sources to wash their knives and dispose of waste, while fishmongers, with their perishable catches, were also near running water or drainage channels. Bakers' stalls were often located where the morning sun would keep the bread warm, and where townsfolk could easily smell the aroma wafting through the streets. Cloth merchants and general traders occupied spaces that allowed them to display their goods prominently, drawing in buyers from multiple directions. Even smaller items, needles, quills, or simple household tools, had their designated corners, often on raised tables to prevent damage or theft. The positioning of stalls also considered pedestrian traffic. The busiest thoroughfares would host goods that required frequent attention or were highly desirable, such as fresh bread, meat, and seasonal fruits. Less essential or more specialized items were placed along side alleys, where interested buyers could seek them out without disrupting the main flow of people. This created a subtle rhythm in the marketplace. The eye and foot would first encounter everyday necessities, then move toward rarer or more luxurious goods. In this way, the very layout of the market guided shoppers, almost imperceptibly, through a choreographed journey. Stalls themselves often displayed goods in ways that were both practical and persuasive. Baskets of apples might be piled in a pyramid to show abundance, while cuts of meat were hung to demonstrate freshness and quality. Spices and dried herbs, precious and aromatic, were sometimes kept in open containers to release their scent into the air, enticing buyers through smell as much as sight. Cloth merchants might drape lengths of fabric across a stall's frame, allowing potential customers to touch, lift, and examine the material fully. The presentation of goods was, in essence, an early form of advertising, a careful combination of arrangement, accessibility, and appeal. Among the busiest and often most chaotic sections of the market were the food stalls. Here, the smells of roasting meat, baking bread, and fresh produce mingled in a sensory tapestry that both attracted and overwhelmed. Butchers' stalls displayed cuts of beef, pork, and poultry, often hung from hooks or laid out on boards. Bakers might offer bread ranging from dense, dark loaves for common folk to lighter, more refined white bread for those who could afford it. Fishmongers brought in the day's catch, displaying it on beds of straw or in shallow wooden boxes with water. Vendors of fruits and vegetables arranged their goods in baskets, sometimes sprinkling water over leafy greens to keep them fresh. Each stall was a small stage, where the merchant acted as both craftsman and performer, offering demonstrations, advice, or simply the appeal of abundance. Non-food stalls added a quieter, yet equally important layer to the marketplace. Leather workers displayed shoes, belts, and pouches, often hanging their wares to catch the light and reveal quality craftsmanship. Blacksmiths and toolmakers might place hammers, nails, and simple implements on tables, or, in the case of heavier items, display them on the ground nearby. Cloth merchants were particularly prominent, draping colorful fabrics in ways that showcased patterns, textures, and dye quality. The arrangement of these goods required both skill and strategy, as each merchant aimed to draw attention while avoiding interference with neighbors. A curious observer would also notice the small, informal stalls, those operated by children, apprentices, or itinerant sellers. These were often simple tables or even baskets on the ground, offering items such as homemade candles, small trinkets, or confections. Though modest in size, these stalls added vitality to the market, a sense of spontaneity and local character. The presence of these smaller vendors reminded visitors that the marketplace was not only about commerce, it was also about community, participation, and the mingling of generations. Animals were another integral part of the market structure. Livestock pens might occupy the edges of the square, containing sheep, pigs, or cattle awaiting purchase. Horses, essential for transport and trade, were tethered nearby, sometimes forming informal corridors within the market. The positioning of animals required careful attention. Merchants needed to ensure the safety of people and goods, while also making the livestock visible and accessible to potential buyers. The lowing of cows, the bleating of sheep, and the snorts of horses contributed to the market's distinctive soundscape, blending with human voices in a complex auditory texture. The layout of commerce also reflected social hierarchy and regulation. Wealthier merchants often occupied prominent positions near major thoroughfares or the center of the square, signaling their importance and drawing buyers. Less affluent traders were relegated to corners or peripheral areas, yet their presence was essential to the overall function of the market. Town authorities sometimes collected fees for prime spots, providing additional income and ensuring that commerce followed a semi-official order. This system created a balance, a mixture of opportunity, competition, and oversight that allowed the market to function smoothly despite its apparent chaos. In addition to physical layout, the marketplace was shaped by the timing and movement of traders. Some stalls were temporary, set up in the early morning and taken down by evening, while others, particularly those selling essential goods, might remain longer. This ebb and flow of activity created a rhythm that buyers soon came to understand. Early risers encountered freshly laid out produce. Mid-morning brought the bustling peak of trade, and late afternoon allowed for bargains as merchants sought to sell remaining goods. The choreography of setup, display, and takedown was as much a part of the market as the items themselves. Even the simple act of walking through the marketplace required navigation and awareness. Shoppers had to weave between stalls, negotiate space with carts and animals, and make decisions about what to examine and purchase. The layout was thus simultaneously functional and experiential, guiding movements, facilitating trade, and creating an immersive environment that engaged sight, sound, and smell. Each stall contributed to the broader atmosphere, forming a living mosaic of commerce that reflected the town's economic vitality, cultural norms, and social structure. In summary, the stalls, booths, and layout of a medieval marketplace were not merely practical necessities, but integral elements of the market's character and function. Through careful placement, thoughtful display, and attention to rhythm and flow, merchants and town authorities created a space that facilitated trade, showcased goods, and fostered social interaction. Every table, hook, and basket played a role in the larger story of medieval commerce, contributing to a sensory, social, and economic ecosystem that sustained the town and its people. The marketplace, in its apparent disorder, was a highly organized and dynamic environment where each stall was both a node of transaction and a point of human connection. Chapter 3: The Sounds and Smells of Trade. Walking deeper into the medieval marketplace, one cannot help but notice that the experience is not merely visual. The market, in all its intricate organization of stalls and wares, is alive with sound and smell. These two senses, often underestimated in the historical imagination, dominate the atmosphere, shaping every step, every decision, and every lingering glance. To understand a medieval market fully, one must attune not only to its sights, the piles of bread, the colorful fabrics, the glinting metal tools, but also to the cacophony of human activity and the complex tapestry of odors that define the space. At dawn, the market begins quietly. Early risers, often bakers and butchers, arrive first, their carts creaking over cobbled streets, bringing supplies from nearby farms or town workshops. The first smells are simple yet pervasive. The yeasty warmth of bread just out of the oven, the earthy scent of fresh vegetables, the faint tang of water in which fish have been kept overnight. These early scents mingle with the aroma of damp straw used for display and packing, creating a subtle perfume that seems almost pastoral in its simplicity. Birds may flutter among the stalls, and the faint hum of awakening townsfolk provides a gentle undertone to the morning ritual. As the morning progresses, the marketplace grows louder. The human element becomes central. Merchants arranging goods, apprentices calling out stock, and shoppers murmuring as they examine items. But beyond these ordinary sounds are the calls of professional criers and hawkers, specialized in attracting attention through a combination of volume, rhythm, and style. A fishmonger might call, "Fresh herring, just caught this morning from the river." The words themselves carry practical information, but it is the cadence, rising and falling, that commands notice. A spice seller may announce, "Cinnamon, saffron, and cloves, rare delights for your table." Their calls, repeated in cycles, form a sonic layer that weaves through the market, punctuated by laughter, bargaining, and occasional disputes. The auditory landscape is not limited to human voices. Livestock in pens bleat, low, or snort, their sounds mingling with the occasional clatter of metal from blacksmiths or tool vendors. Horses, tethered near the edges of the market, shift and stamp, adding a rhythmic element that merges with the human chorus. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer, while less constant, punctuates the day with sharp precision, reminding shoppers of both craft and labor. Each sound, whether persistent or fleeting, contributes to the unique rhythm of the marketplace. In a sense, the market is like a living orchestra, with voices, animals, and tools all contributing to a composition that changes from hour to hour. Smell, however, is perhaps the most immediate and immersive of the market's sensory experiences. Each category of goods possesses a signature aroma, and the mixture of these scents is both intoxicating and overwhelming. Near the baker's corner, warm, yeasty bread draws in passers-by with a comfort that is at once primal and communal. The scent of baked goods often mingles with that of roasting meat from the butcher's and cooking vendors' stalls. Sizzling pork, beef, and poultry release rich, fatty aromas that make the stomach respond even before hunger is consciously recognized. The olfactory impact is amplified by the presence of spices, which were both a luxury and a fascination in medieval towns. Spices, imported over long distances and traded at great expense, were displayed in open containers so that their aroma could entice buyers. Cinnamon, clove, and nutmeg sent sharp, sweet, and warm scents into the air, cutting through the more earthy or smoky odors of meat and bread. Pepper, black and pungent, added a biting tang to the sensory mix. These fragrances were not merely pleasurable. They were signals of wealth, sophistication, and taste, allowing the market to function as a cultural as well as a commercial space. Other smells marked the less glamorous, yet equally essential aspects of market life. Fishmongers, despite their careful handling, could not fully mask the brine and sharp tang of the day's catch. Leatherworkers' stalls carried the musky, almost acrid scent of tanned hides, while tanners' workshops on the periphery contributed stronger odors that wafted through the edges of the market. The mixture of these smells could be overwhelming, yet it was accepted as part of daily life, a reminder of both the diversity and the vitality of trade. The combination of sound and smell also influenced behavior. Certain areas of the market, louder and more fragrant, naturally drew crowds, while quieter, less odorous corners were frequented by those seeking specialized goods or a moment of respite. Shoppers relied on both senses to navigate the market. The sound of a familiar vendor's call might guide one toward favorite products, while the scent of fresh bread or spices could inspire spontaneous purchases. In this way, the marketplace orchestrated human attention, subtly directing foot traffic and creating clusters of social and economic interaction. Entertainment and performance, too, added layers to the soundscape. Street musicians played lutes, flutes, or drums, providing rhythm and melody that echoed across the market square. Jugglers, acrobats, and wandering minstrels drew small crowds, their presence marked by laughter, applause, and the occasional shouted encouragement. Even these moments of amusement contributed to the olfactory experience. Roasted nuts, sweetmeats, or small fried cakes might be sold alongside performances, creating an association between sight, sound, and smell. Furthermore, the market's auditory and olfactory dimensions were affected by the natural environment. Morning dew or light rain could amplify the scent of damp straw, mud, or fresh produce, while wind carried calls, laughter, and aromas across the square, blending them into new combinations as it shifted. The layout of streets and stalls influenced these effects. Narrow alleys funneled voices and scents, creating pockets of intensity, while open squares allowed sounds and smells to disperse more evenly. In this sense, the market was a dynamic, living space, constantly shaped by human activity, natural forces, and architectural choices. Silence, when it occurred, was just as telling as sound. Before the rush of customers or after the midday peak, quiet moments allowed scents to linger and mingle in ways that might otherwise be unnoticed. The warmth of the sun on bread, the subtle musk of tanned leather, the faint sharpness of dried herbs, all became more apparent in these pauses, offering a meditative experience for those willing to notice. For some shoppers, the market was not only a place of transaction, but a space of sensory reflection, where everyday commerce intersected with the rhythms of life. Even disputes, arguments, or haggling contributed to the market's character. Voices rising over prices or perceived quality were part of the day's soundtrack, punctuating the more consistent hum of activity. Merchants often employed varying tones, from persuasive softness to commanding shouts, to assert authority, attract attention, or express exasperation. These vocal nuances added to the richness of sound, reinforcing the perception that the marketplace was not merely a collection of goods, but a space of human interaction, negotiation, and negotiation's emotional undertones. Ultimately, the sounds and smells of trade in a medieval market were inseparable from its identity. They were not distractions but fundamental components of the experience, shaping how people moved, what they noticed, and how they remembered the space. A market was a sensory ecosystem, where every stall, every vendor, every animal, and every shopper contributed to a complex, layered environment. To walk through a medieval market was to be immersed in a world of audible and olfactory textures, a slow, deliberate journey through commerce and community that lingered long after the senses returned to quietude. In this way, the medieval marketplace reveals itself not just as a site of economic activity, but as a rich, living theatre of everyday life. The rhythm of voices, the layering of scents, the interplay between human and animal, trader and customer, all create an atmosphere that is at once practical and enchanting. By attending to the sounds and smells, one begins to understand the heartbeat of the market, the invisible threads of communication, and the subtle cues that guided behavior. It is an immersive world where the senses are constantly engaged, and where every inhaled aroma or heard call contributes to the unfolding story of medieval trade. Chapter 4. Money, barter, and the price of goods. The exchange of goods was inseparable from the exchange of money, and the subtle, often intricate practices of barter. To understand how commerce functioned in these bustling squares, it is essential to explore the coins, tokens, and goods themselves, as well as the social and economic context that gave them value. The medieval market was not only a site of visual and sensory richness, but also a domain of careful calculation, negotiation, and trust, where merchants and shoppers alike had to be vigilant, aware, and sometimes cunning. Money in the medieval period was far from uniform. Coins varied greatly in material, weight, and value depending on the issuing authority, whether a king, local lord, or city council. Silver pennies were common in England, while groats, deniers, and pfennigs circulated elsewhere on the continent. Gold coins, rarer and more prestigious, were often reserved for larger transactions, luxury items, or dealings between wealthy merchants. Each coin carried not only intrinsic value, but also a mark of authority, stamped with symbols, faces of rulers, or coats of arms, serving as a guarantee of authenticity and weight. To the casual observer, the coins may have seemed small, simple, and uniform, but in reality, every transaction demanded a careful eye, sometimes a touch, to verify that the metal was genuine. The act of paying for goods required more than merely passing coins from hand to hand. Vendors were trained to detect counterfeit or clipped coins, and they often used small scales or metal touchstones to ensure accuracy. In larger towns, municipal authorities or guilds sometimes mandated regular inspection of coins, establishing official rates of exchange and penalizing those who attempted to circulate debased currency. Such measures protected both buyer and seller, but also added layers of complexity to each purchase, requiring a blend of trust, knowledge, and social understanding. Yet money was not the only medium of exchange. Barter continued to play a significant role, particularly in rural or semi-urban areas. Farmers and artisans might bring grain, cheese, or woven cloth to the market in exchange for tools, spices, or household necessities. Barter was often highly personalized. A merchant might agree to trade a sack of flour for a piece of iron, but the precise value depended on quality, season, and local demand. Unlike coin-based transactions, barter required negotiation skills and social acumen, for both parties had to agree not only on the goods' worth, but also on the fairness of the exchange. It was a system that rewarded knowledge of local conditions, familiarity with the products, and a keen sense of timing. The concept of price in the medieval market was fluid, shaped by supply, demand, and social norms. Unlike the rigid pricing of modern stores, medieval merchants often adjusted prices according to the time of day, the season, or the perceived wealth and bargaining skill of the customer. A loaf of bread might cost more in the early morning, when freshness was at its peak, or at a time when wheat was scarce due to a poor harvest. Similarly, a rare spice or imported cloth could fetch a premium not only for its rarity, but for the spectacle of display, with merchants emphasizing color, texture, or scent to justify the cost. In this way, pricing was both practical and performative, a negotiation of tangible value and social perception. Haggling, or bargaining, was an expected and essential part of market life. Shoppers, trained from childhood, approached stalls with a mixture of politeness and assertiveness, ready to challenge initial prices. A vendor might start with a higher price, anticipating a reduction, and the exchange would unfold like a carefully choreographed dance. Words, gestures, and expressions all played a role. A raised eyebrow, a hesitant reach for a coin, or a friendly jest could influence the final agreement. The process was as much about relationship building as it was about economics. Repeated interactions between buyers and sellers established reputations, fostered trust, and sometimes even created long-term networks of trade that extended beyond the town square. Specialized coins and tokens added further layers of complexity. In some regions, merchants issued their own tokens, redeemable for goods at their stalls or within guild networks. Churches and monasteries sometimes circulated tokens for charitable or religious purposes, redeemable for bread, ale, or candles. Even small towns might produce local tokens to ease transactions when official coins were scarce. The presence of these alternative currencies required attention and adaptability from both traders and customers, who had to understand value not only in metal, but in social and institutional trust. In addition to coins and barter, credit occasionally entered the marketplace. Wealthier merchants or guild members might extend short-term loans or accept deferred payment for goods. Such arrangements were not casual. They often required written agreements, witnesses, or a public acknowledgement of debt. These practices underscore the sophistication of medieval commerce, revealing that market transactions were not simply immediate exchanges, but part of a broader network of obligations, reputation, and social capital. Taxes and levies were also intimately tied to money and barter. City authorities often collected fees for the right to sell in the marketplace, sometimes charging based on stall size, the type of goods, or the duration of market presence. Additional tolls might apply to imported items, luxury products, or high-volume traders. These financial impositions were essential for municipal governance, funding infrastructure, public safety, and ceremonial events, but they also influenced pricing, as merchants inevitably passed costs onto customers. Observant shoppers were aware of such structures, often using knowledge of regulations to negotiate fair deals or to anticipate fluctuations in value. The sensory richness of the market, discussed in the previous chapter, interacted closely with economic practices. The smell of fresh bread or spices could signal quality. The sound of a vendor's confident call might convey reliability, and the visual appeal of a display could justify a higher price. All these cues inform decisions about value and trust, creating a multi-layered marketplace in which money, barter, and social perception intertwine seamlessly. Each transaction was thus not simply about acquiring goods, but about navigating a complex web of economic, sensory, and social information. The diversity of goods further complicated valuation. Staple items like grain, bread, or salt were relatively stable in price, but could fluctuate dramatically in response to harvests, weather, or political unrest. Luxury items, such as fine silks, spices, or imported wines, were more volatile and depended heavily on timing, connections, and appearance. A savvy shopper knew when to buy common items in bulk, when to wait for the right season for rarities, and when to rely on barter rather than coin. These strategies reveal a sophisticated understanding of scarcity, supply chains, and temporal rhythms, knowledge that was essential for both survival and comfort. Finally, the marketplace was a site of learning about money and exchange. Children often accompanied their parents, absorbing lessons about coin recognition, weighing, and haggling from an early age. Apprentices learned to calculate costs, measure goods accurately, and negotiate with both tact and firmness. Even casual observers could pick up insights into social hierarchies, economic networks, and practical arithmetic. In this sense, the market functioned as an informal classroom, where the skills of commerce were passed down and refined across generations. Money, barter, and pricing in the medieval market reveal a world of complexity, adaptability, and social nuance. Coins were not simply metal, they were symbols of trust and authority. Barter was not simply exchange, it was negotiation, relationship building, and strategic assessment. Prices were not fixed, they were flexible, responsive, and performative. To understand the medieval marketplace is to appreciate the skill, knowledge, and attentiveness required to navigate its stalls, its sounds, and its smells, and to participate in a system that was as much about human connection as it was about material exchange. Here, every coin passed, every deal struck, and every barter completed was a note in the ongoing symphony of trade, echoing through the streets and alleys of towns, shaping daily life, and sustaining the rhythm of medieval existence. Chapter 5. Food for sale, bread, ale, meat, and more. As the morning light gradually warms the cobblestones and timbered facades of a medieval town, the marketplace begins to stir not just with movement, but with a profusion of scents and sights that speak to the heart of daily sustenance. Among all goods, food dominates both space and attention, for it is not merely a commodity, it is the source of life, comfort, and celebration. To wander the medieval market is to experience the rhythms of daily feeding, from the humble loaf of bread to the occasional treat of meat, from barrels of ale to jars of imported honey, each carrying layers of social, economic, and sensory meaning. Bread, the foundation of the medieval diet, holds a central place in the market. Bakers' stalls, often arranged prominently along main thoroughfares or near the town's gates, offer a spectrum of loaves. Coarse rye or barley bread serves the labouring classes, dark and heavy, a filling staple that sustains long hours of work. For wealthier citizens, white wheat loaves, sometimes scented with herbs or shaped elaborately, symbolize status and refinement. Bakers, their aprons dusted with flour, display their wares in wicker baskets or wooden shelves, and the scent of baking permeates the surrounding streets. A market visitor might pause not only to purchase a loaf, but to observe the skill of shaping, scoring, and baking. For the presentation of bread is as much a mark of quality as its texture or taste. Ale and beer, brewed in small towns or imported from surrounding regions, complement the bread. These beverages are offered in barrels, pitchers, or small casks, and their aroma mingles with the smell of baking. Taverns and alewives often maintain stalls during market days, pouring frothy cups into wooden mugs for travellers, merchants, and townsfolk alike. Ale, unlike modern beer, is usually a staple drink, consumed by children and adults alike, providing calories, hydration, and warmth. For those with access to imported wines, the market presents more exotic options. Fortified or spiced wines, delicate and fragrant, often enjoyed in moderation by wealthier patrons. The careful storage of these drinks, in barrels sealed with wax or cork, adds to the visual and olfactory tapestry of the marketplace. Meat, while less frequent in the diets of peasants, remains a prized commodity in the market. Butchers, often organized into guilds, display cuts of pork, beef, mutton, and occasionally game on wooden tables, hanging carcasses to showcase freshness. They maintain precise standards for weight, appearance, and hygiene, as regulated by town ordinances. Market buyers inspect meat with care, sometimes negotiating prices or choosing cuts based on occasion and status. Preservation methods, salting, smoking, or drying, allow for trade in products that might travel some distance from slaughterhouses, bringing richer flavors and variety to the marketplace. Special occasions, such as feasts or religious holidays, see an increase in the availability of these meats, turning the market into a place of anticipation and celebration. Fish, too, has its designated place in the bustling market. Freshwater species from nearby rivers and lakes, along with salted or dried fish transported from coastal regions, provide protein for townsfolk, especially on fasting days dictated by religious practice. Fishmongers display their wares on beds of straw or ice when available, their cries calling attention to the day's catch. The fish market, often located near water sources for ease of cleaning and transport, adds a distinct briny scent to the marketplace, contrasting with the sweeter aroma of baked goods and the earthy fragrance of vegetables and grains. Dairy products, such as cheese and butter, are another essential category. Cheese, ranging from soft, fresh curds to aged, pungent varieties, is offered in rounds, wedges, or small blocks, sometimes wrapped in leaves or cloth. Butter, churned locally or brought from surrounding villages, appears in tubs or molded into decorative shapes. These products are sold both for immediate consumption and for storage, playing a crucial role in daily meals, cooking, and trade. The presence of dairy also signals seasonal rhythms, as milk availability fluctuates with livestock cycles. Fruits and vegetables, though often less central than bread or meat, bring color and freshness to the stalls. Apples, pears, plums, and berries are sold alongside root vegetables such as carrots, turnips, and onions. Their appearance in the market reflects both local harvests and imported goods brought by traveling merchants. Spices, though rarer and more expensive, enhance the market's diversity. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, and saffron, often arriving via long-distance trade from the east, are displayed in small quantities, their scents tantalizing and foreign. These exotic additions allow wealthier patrons to showcase sophistication and indulgence while offering a glimpse of the wider world to all who pass through the market. Legumes, grains, and preserved foods form the backbone of many diets and are prominently available. Lentils, beans, barley, and oats are sold in sacks, sometimes measured by volume or weight, and often used for soups, porridges, or stews. Salt, essential for preservation and seasoning, is another vital commodity, often controlled by town authorities or sold in regulated amounts. The combination of staple and specialty items creates a layered market environment where sustenance, luxury, and social signaling converge in a single bustling space. Market life is not only about food itself, but about the interactions it engenders. Vendors skillfully describe their wares, emphasizing freshness, origin, and quality. Shoppers inspect, taste, smell, and feel, evaluating both the product and the trustworthiness of the seller. Negotiation is constant. A fair price is achieved through exchange, observation, and sometimes persuasion. Transactions are punctuated by the rhythmic clink of coins, the rustle of bags, and the laughter or exclamations of both buyers and sellers. Children, apprentices, and helpers move among the stalls, learning the intricacies of commerce while absorbing lessons in quality, measurement, and the value of food itself. The market also reflects the social hierarchy and seasonal cycles of medieval life. Certain foods, such as fresh meat, imported spices, or fine wine, are markers of status, accessible primarily to the wealthier classes. Conversely, more modest staples, grains, vegetables, and common bread, sustain the majority of townspeople. The ebb and flow of supply, influenced by harvests, weather, and regional trade, creates a rhythm to market attendance. Shoppers adjust their timing, prioritize certain stalls, and develop relationships with vendors whose goods they trust. Seasonal festivals and religious observances further alter availability and consumption, turning the market into a dynamic stage upon which communal life unfolds. It's a space of learning, exploration, and discovery. Novices observe the selection of grains, the qualities of cheese, and the subtle differences between cuts of meat. Merchants exchange advice on preservation, cooking, and pairing, creating a rich culture of shared knowledge. The diversity of foods, the careful attention to quality, and the negotiation of price all contribute to a marketplace that is both practical and profoundly human, a reflection of daily needs, social structures, and the interconnectedness of life in a medieval town. Thus, to walk through the food stalls of a medieval marketplace is to step into a living classroom of taste, economy, and community. The smells, textures, and flavors do more than nourish. They create rhythms, relationships, and rituals that define both daily life and extraordinary occasions. Bread and ale sustain, meat and spices celebrate, fruits and vegetables color the season, and all combine to make the market not merely a place of commerce but a central stage of human experience. Here, one can witness the careful balance of practicality, pleasure, and social interaction, all unfolding in a space that is at once ordinary and extraordinary, routine and spectacular, essential and celebratory. Chapter 6: Fabrics, Tools, and the World of Everyday Goods. As the bustling marketplace unfolds beyond the stalls of bread, ale, and fresh produce, another realm of trade takes shape, one that addresses the practical needs and aspirations of every medieval household: the sale of fabrics, tools, and everyday goods. This part of the market, often arranged along the wider streets or in dedicated sections, is a landscape of textures, colors, and craftsmanship, where the eye and the hand are as engaged as the taste buds in the food markets. The goods sold here, textiles, clothing, leather, metalwork, and household implements, reveal not only the economic vitality of the town, but also the ingenuity and artistry of its artisans. Textiles form a vivid and essential category. Cloth merchants display bolts of wool, linen, and imported silks in orderly rows, sometimes draped over wooden beams or stacked in neat piles. The colors range from the muted tones of undyed flax to the deep reds and blues achieved through painstaking dyeing processes. Dyes themselves, often derived from plants, insects, or minerals, are treasured commodities. Woad produces blue, madder yields red, and safflower creates subtle yellows. These textiles are inspected closely. Buyers press their fingers along the fibers, feeling the softness of fine linen, the coarseness of wool, or the shimmer of silk. The weight, weave, and dye quality are critical in determining both price and suitability, whether for making garments, household items, or ceremonial attire. Clothing and apparel, whether ready-made or tailored from purchased cloth, also occupy a prominent place in the market. Tailors, sometimes working from small booths adjacent to fabric merchants, offer garments for men, women, and children. These garments vary widely, from simple tunics and smocks for laborers to intricately embroidered dresses and doublets for wealthier citizens. The market is a place where trends, local styles, and functional needs intersect. The ability to negotiate a fair price for a tunic or a cloak, while ensuring the quality of stitching and fabric, reflects the buyer's experience and social awareness. Meanwhile, apprentices observe the techniques of cutting, sewing, and finishing, learning both craft and commerce. Leather goods are another vital component of the marketplace. Cobbler stalls display shoes, boots, and sandals crafted from soft or hardened leather, while saddlers offer belts, harnesses, and horse tack. Leather workers also create pouches, gloves, and protective aprons for craftsmen, soldiers, and travelers. Each item is carefully inspected for thickness, flexibility, and durability, and buyers may press, bend, or even smell the leather to ensure quality. Leather is both practical and status-driven. Fine, polished leather may indicate wealth or rank, whereas sturdy, unrefined leather fulfills the everyday needs of common folk. Tools and implements, iron and wood fashioned into instruments of labor, fill another vital section of the market. Blacksmiths display hammers, tongs, nails, knives, axes, and plowshares, sometimes demonstrating their strength or precision by striking metal on anvils in rhythmic cadence. Carpenters and coopers offer chisels, saws, and barrels, essential for construction, storage, and trade. Potters and ceramicists present jugs, bowls, plates, and cooking vessels, their glazed surfaces glinting in the morning light. Buyers here are as attentive to function as to form. A well-made axe, a sturdy pot, or a finely balanced knife can make the difference in the day-to-day work of home, farm, or workshop. The marketplace is alive with the textures, sounds, and scents of these trades. The sharp tang of iron, the earthy aroma of leather, and the faint sweetness of treated wood mingle with the earlier scents of bread and spices. Vendors call out descriptions of their wares, demonstrating strength, flexibility, or beauty. Buyers touch, test, and negotiate, assessing not only the material qualities, but the reputation of the maker. Many items are marked by guild regulations, ensuring a standard of quality and authenticity. Apprentices and journeymen circulate among the stalls, learning through observation, repetition, and practice, forming the next generation of skilled tradespeople. Household items, from brooms and baskets to lamps and cooking implements, occupy adjacent spaces. These everyday goods may seem simple, but they are crucial to life in a medieval town. The construction of a basket, the balance of a scale, or the efficiency of a wooden ladle can significantly affect domestic routines. Some items are locally produced. Others are imported via regional trade networks, adding novelty and prestige to otherwise ordinary utensils. Buyers take note of durability, utility, and sometimes decoration, as even functional objects may be embellished with carvings, painted patterns, or metal fittings. The marketplace for fabrics and tools is also a stage of social interaction. Negotiation is artful. Merchants rely on skill, experience, and knowledge of the buyer's needs, while shoppers weigh quality, price, and reliability. Reputation is vital. Artisans known for superior craftsmanship attract both loyalty and attention, while a single misstep can damage business. Observers learn from the exchanges, acquiring not only goods, but knowledge of standards, materials, and social hierarchies. Conversations might turn from technique to fashion, from trade news to the arrival of new artisans or exotic materials. In this way, the market becomes both a place of commerce and a center of information. Seasonal and religious rhythms also shape the trade in everyday goods. Before festivals or major celebrations, demand for new clothing, utensils, and decorative items surges. Apprentices and journeymen may produce larger quantities, while merchants prepare to receive visiting customers, sometimes offering credit or special arrangements. Conversely, in quieter seasons, artisans may use the slower market days to refine techniques, experiment with designs, or trade among themselves. The ebb and flow of supply, demand, and production creates a market environment that is dynamic, responsive, and deeply integrated into the social fabric of the town. Trade in fabrics and tools often intersects with other marketplaces and fairs, where long-distance merchants bring exotic silks, rare metals, or advanced tools from distant lands. The arrival of such goods excites local buyers, offers opportunities for imitation or adaptation, and connects the town to wider networks of commerce and culture. Even local shoppers, who may not afford the rarest imports, witness trends, techniques, and fashions from afar, integrating them into local practices. The market thus serves as a conduit for both tangible goods and cultural exchange. The sale of fabrics, tools, and household items illustrates the practical ingenuity of medieval society. Each item represents a response to a specific need: clothing to protect and adorn, tools to labor and create, utensils to sustain and organize daily life. The market is the stage where these responses are displayed, tested, and exchanged, where craftsmanship meets commerce, and where the rhythm of everyday life becomes visible in tangible form. Through touch, sight, and negotiation, townsfolk engage with the materials and skills that define their environment, their labor, and their social connections. In essence, this sector of the market exemplifies the blend of functionality, artistry, and social engagement that characterizes the medieval marketplace. Here, the practical and the aesthetic coexist. Bolts of cloth and polished tools, leather boots and ceramic jugs, wooden brooms and iron nails, all are part of the living, breathing economy of the town. The marketplace is thus not only a center for trade, but a place where knowledge, skill, and community intersect, revealing the depth and complexity of medieval life beyond mere sustenance. Chapter 7: Entertainment and Street Life. As the morning bustle of the market continues, one begins to notice that the medieval marketplace is more than a place to exchange goods. It is a stage for spectacle, performance, and the daily rhythms of public life. Among the stalls of bread, cloth, and ironware, there exists another layer of commerce, one that trades not in tangible goods, but in amusement, wonder, and communal experience. The sounds of music, laughter, and conversation mingle with the calls of vendors and the footsteps of townsfolk, creating a living symphony that is distinctly urban and deeply human. Street performers are a familiar sight in the marketplace. Jugglers, acrobats, and tumblers attract crowds with their daring feats, spinning clubs, leaping through the air, and bending their bodies in seemingly impossible ways. Their performances often unfold in small circles, sometimes marked by a ring of stones or ropes, where the audience gathers close enough to observe skill, yet maintains a respectful distance. These entertainers not only provide amusement, but also serve as a conduit for news and commentary. Jesters may interweave jokes about local officials or neighboring towns, offering insight wrapped in humor. Music is central to the ambiance of the market. Minstrels, often itinerant musicians, play lutes, flutes, and small percussion instruments, moving between stalls or performing from raised platforms. Their repertoire includes both popular songs and traditional ballads, sometimes accompanied by dance or simple theatrical enactments. The melodies, cheerful or plaintive, infuse the market with rhythm, signaling changes in the day's pace or drawing attention to particular performances. Music is not merely entertainment. It reinforces community, marking shared experiences and enhancing the sensory richness of market life. Fortune-telling and street magic are also common. Soothsayers and astrologers set up small tables or cloths, adorned with charts, dice, or mysterious objects, inviting passers-by to glimpse their future or seek advice. These encounters, often brief, combine ritual, storytelling, and social interaction. Townsfolk approach with curiosity or skepticism, sometimes paying a coin for a reading, sometimes simply observing the reactions of neighbors. In this way, the marketplace becomes a space where belief, play, and social observation intersect. Clowns and comic performers contribute to the atmosphere, blending physical comedy with verbal wit. They may mimic the gestures of merchants, exaggerate the motions of laborers, or enact simple skits that reflect daily life, often improvising based on the crowd's responses. Their humor, accessible and immediate, transcends social boundaries, creating a shared experience for both wealthy citizens and common folk. Children are particularly drawn to these performances, their laughter echoing alongside the clatter of carts and the calls of vendors. Animals, too, are sometimes part of the spectacle. Trained dogs, monkeys, or even birds may perform tricks, delighting onlookers and adding an element of unpredictability to the market environment. These performances are not only entertainment, but also a display of skill, training, and sometimes exotic novelty, connecting the town to broader networks of knowledge and animal husbandry. The presence of such creatures underscores the marketplace as a space of wonder and learning, where curiosity is both entertained and instructed. Street life in the market also encompasses social interactions beyond performance. Friends and neighbors meet at familiar stalls, exchanging news of family, farm, or trade. Merchants discuss the quality of goods, upcoming fairs, or the latest innovations in craft. Apprentices accompany masters, learning the rhythms of trade, observing negotiations, and absorbing social norms. Children weave between adults, sometimes helping with errands, sometimes simply exploring the sights and sounds of the bustling square. The marketplace is a microcosm of the town, reflecting its hierarchies, networks, and communal bonds. Begging and charity are part of this public life as well. The market is a place where the less fortunate may seek alms, sometimes standing near busy intersections or performing small tasks in exchange for coins or food. Churches or religious confraternities may establish guidelines for fair distribution, and some merchants display generosity, giving leftover bread or other goods to those in need. These acts of charity are woven into the social fabric, reflecting both piety and practical concern for maintaining civic order. Markets also serve as venues for civic announcements and public debate. Town criers proclaim news from distant regions, the arrival of new laws, or the schedules of fairs and festivals. Occasionally, disputes over property, trade, or social issues are aired in the open, with officials mediating or simply observing the interactions. In this sense, the market functions as a forum where information circulates freely, shaping perceptions, alliances, and local knowledge. Religious life intersects with the marketplace as well. Monks or friars may travel through, offering prayers, distributing small devotional items, or engaging in brief sermons. Their presence reminds the townsfolk of spiritual responsibilities even amidst the profane rhythms of trade and entertainment. Some perform charitable acts, such as distributing bread or herbs, linking spiritual devotion with tangible care for the community. The coexistence of sacred and secular elements is a hallmark of medieval public space, evident in the market as a place of both earthly commerce and moral observation. The architecture and layout of the market enhance this vibrancy. Open squares allow space for performances, while narrow streets and alleyways provide intimate corners for smaller gatherings or private conversations. Platforms, steps, or even barrels may serve as impromptu stages, allowing performers to rise above the crowd. The physical environment shapes social interactions, guiding attention, movement, and engagement, while simultaneously reflecting the practical needs of trade, storage, and daily circulation. Seasonal rhythms influence the types and intensity of entertainment. During festivals, market days are extended with additional performances, contests, and spectacles, attracting visitors from neighboring towns or the countryside. Religious celebrations, harvest times, and fairs bring temporary structures, special performers, and a heightened sense of occasion. Conversely, in quieter seasons, entertainers may travel from town to town, offering continuity of performance while adapting to local audiences. The cyclical nature of these activities ties entertainment closely to both the calendar and the economy, demonstrating how leisure is interwoven with broader patterns of medieval life. Throughout the day, the marketplace's sounds, sights, and movements create a sensory tapestry. The rhythmic pounding of hammers at the blacksmith's forge mingles with the strumming of lutes and the laughter of children. The smell of fresh bread and roasting meat combines with the earthy aroma of animals and the pungent tang of dyes and leather. Colors, movement, and sound converge, forming a dynamic, immersive environment that captivates every sense. Participating in this world, whether as a buyer, performer, or observer, requires attentiveness, curiosity, and an appreciation for the intricate interplay of human activity. Ultimately, the street life and entertainment of the marketplace highlight the human dimension of medieval trade. Beyond the exchange of goods lies the exchange of ideas, stories, and social energy. Performers, musicians, jesters, and fortune tellers provide joy, reflection, and communal connection, enriching the market experience and reinforcing social bonds. The marketplace is both stage and audience, a site where everyday life is dramatized, observed, and shared. Here, one witnesses not merely the movement of commodities, but the flow of culture, knowledge, and human emotion. In this way, the medieval marketplace is revealed as a living organism. Commerce and craft, sustenance and spectacle, work and play are inseparable. The entertainment and street life of the market contribute to its rhythm, charm, and vitality, transforming it into a space that is both functional and profoundly human. To wander through the market is to encounter a microcosm of medieval society itself, where the material and the social, the practical and the performative intertwine in a delicate, harmonious balance. The marketplace, in all its sensory richness and social complexity, is a testament to the ingenuity, resilience, and creativity of the people who inhabit it. Chapter 8. Rules, Taxes, and the Market Officials. A medieval marketplace may appear to a casual observer as a place of spontaneity, full of the energy of vendors, buyers, and performers. Yet beneath this lively exterior lies a structured, regulated environment. The market was not an anarchic swirl of voices and activity, but a carefully managed space, governed by rules designed to ensure fairness, safety, and the collection of revenue. Market officials, inspectors, and town authorities maintain these regulations, creating order within the apparent chaos of trade and social interaction. At the heart of market governance were the market officials, often appointed by the town council, local lord, or guilds. These individuals, sometimes called market wardens or privileged overseers, held the responsibility of overseeing all transactions and ensuring adherence to the town's ordinances. Their duties were diverse. They inspected goods for quality, monitored the weights and measures used by vendors, collected fees and taxes, and mediated disputes between merchants and customers. Their presence was both regulatory and symbolic, reminding everyone that the market was not only a hub of commerce, but also an institution under civic authority. One of the primary concerns of market officials was the enforcement of fair measurement and quality standards. Medieval towns depended heavily on standardized units of measurement: ells for cloth, bushels for grain, and pounds for meat. market officials would carry calibrated weights and measuring rods, comparing them against the devices used by merchants. Any deviation from these standards was met with fines, confiscation of goods, or public admonishment. In an era before mass production or modern consumer protections, these checks were vital to maintain trust between seller and buyer. A loaf of bread or a barrel of wine promised a certain quantity and quality, and the officials' oversight ensured that promise was fulfilled. The quality of essential goods like bread, wine, ale, and meat was also rigorously monitored. Bakers were required to produce loaves of specific weight and consistency. Brewers had to ensure that ale or beer met established taste and strength criteria. Wine imported from distant regions, though exotic and desirable, was inspected to verify authenticity and avoid adulteration. In some towns, special inspectors called ale tasters or bread weighers would systematically test samples from different stalls. A loaf of bread that was underweight or poorly baked could be confiscated, and its baker fined, providing both deterrence and assurance for customers. Alongside quality control, the collection of market fees and taxes formed a critical aspect of governance. Towns derived significant income from the marketplace, funding walls, public buildings, and civic defense. Merchants often paid a fee to occupy a stall, sometimes calculated as a flat rate or proportionate to the expected profits from sales. Traveling traders, particularly those attending fairs or markets outside their home region, might pay tolls for entry, sometimes levied by the town, sometimes by a local lord who held authority over the surrounding lands. These taxes were not merely a source of revenue, they were also a means of asserting authority and maintaining a regulated space within which commerce could flourish. Dispute resolution was another essential function of market oversight. In an environment bustling with buyers and sellers, conflicts were inevitable. Perhaps a customer claimed that a cloth was inferior to what was promised, or a butcher was accused of shortchanging a buyer. Market officials would adjudicate such disputes, often using local custom as a guide. Evidence might include witnesses, weights, samples of goods, or sworn statements. The public nature of these resolutions reinforced fairness and discouraged cheating, ensuring that both merchants and townspeople respected the authority of the market. The presence of guilds also intersected with official oversight. Many crafts, baking, brewing, blacksmithing, and tailoring, for instance, were regulated by guilds, associations that set standards for apprenticeship, production, and conduct. Guild representatives often collaborated with market officials to inspect members' goods, enforce quality, and maintain ethical practice. In this way, the market became a cooperative space, regulated not only by civic authority, but also by the self-interest and reputation of professional communities. Guild oversight ensured that customers could expect consistent quality, while simultaneously protecting the economic interests of artisans and merchants. Public order extended beyond trade to the general safety and decorum of the marketplace. Market officials patrolled the square, ensuring that streets were not blocked, goods were properly displayed, and disputes did not escalate into violence. Merchants and buyers alike understood that certain behaviors were prohibited. Theft, public brawling, or the use of fraudulent scales could result in fines, imprisonment, or corporal punishment. The enforcement of such rules preserved the market as a safe space for daily life, sustaining both economic activity and social cohesion. Weights, measures, and visible markers of regulation also served as a pedagogical tool. Townsfolk learned to recognize official seals on scales, the presence of inspection marks on bread or barrels, and other indicators of legitimacy. These markers not only guided consumer choice, but reinforced the perception of the market as a structured, trustworthy space. Vendors who consistently violated rules risked reputational damage in addition to formal penalties, highlighting the interplay between legal enforcement and social accountability. The regulation of foreign merchants and traveling traders presented additional complexity. Visiting merchants, especially those from distant towns or other regions, brought goods not locally available, such as rare fabrics, spices, or exotic fruits. While their presence enriched the market, officials monitored these transactions closely, collecting appropriate fees and ensuring that imported goods met local standards. Occasionally, foreign traders operated under different legal arrangements or temporary privileges granted by the town, adding layers to the governance system and reflecting the interconnectedness of medieval commerce across regions. Public notice and transparency were essential components of enforcement. Town criers or heralds often announced regulations, fees, and any recent changes in market laws, making information accessible to all. Written notices might be posted on boards or walls within the market, detailing prices, measures, or prohibitions. This transparency helped prevent disputes and reinforce the legitimacy of officials, ensuring that both merchants and customers understood the rules by which they were expected to operate. The regulatory framework extended even to the hours and timing of market activity. Market days were typically fixed, and stalls had designated spaces, preventing overcrowding and facilitating inspection. Seasonal adjustments might occur, especially during festivals, harvests, or annual fairs, but officials worked to ensure continuity and predictability. Compliance with these schedules ensured that townspeople and visiting merchants could plan their activities efficiently, contributing to the overall rhythm of urban life. Social hierarchy and power were also evident in the operations of market regulation. Officials were often members of the town elite, guild leaders, or appointees of the Lord, reflecting the intertwined nature of commerce, governance, and authority. Their decisions carried weight not only because of the law, but also because of social standing, creating a system in which civic, economic, and social structures were mutually reinforcing. Respect for authority was cultivated through ritualized inspection, public pronouncements, and visible enforcement, embedding the norms of governance within everyday experience. Finally, the cultural and symbolic significance of market regulation should not be underestimated. By enforcing standards, collecting taxes, and maintaining order, officials reinforced the perception of the town as a coherent, functioning community. The marketplace became a microcosm of social values. Fairness, trust, responsibility, and accountability were encoded in the very structure of daily trade. Beyond mere commerce, these practices conveyed lessons in civic life, shaping behaviors, expectations, and communal identity. In sum, the medieval marketplace was far more than a simple site of buying and selling. Rules, taxes, and market officials transformed it into a carefully regulated ecosystem, balancing economic opportunity with social stability. Oversight of weights and measures, quality control, dispute resolution, and revenue collection ensured fairness and maintained confidence among townsfolk and visitors alike. Guild collaboration, transparency, and public enforcement reinforced order, while the integration of civic, economic, and social authority created a marketplace that reflected and sustained the broader structures of medieval life. To walk through such a marketplace was to witness not only trading goods, but also the workings of law, community, and culture in real time, a living example of the delicate balance between freedom and regulation in a bustling medieval town. Chapter 9. Traveling Fairs, the great annual markets. While daily markets formed the steady heartbeat of medieval towns, there existed another layer of commerce that pulsed with a more vibrant, exotic energy: the travelling fairs. Unlike the routine bustle of a local market, these grand gatherings were rare, periodic events, often held once or twice a year, that transformed towns into centres of trade, culture, and spectacle. They drew merchants from distant lands, offering goods and experiences that would be impossible to encounter during ordinary market days. For townspeople, farmers, and artisans alike, the arrival of a travelling fair was an eagerly anticipated event, blending commerce, social gathering, and festival into one extraordinary occasion. Timing and organisation. The timing of travelling fairs was carefully coordinated with the agricultural and religious calendar. Spring and autumn were particularly common, coinciding with harvest cycles or religious feast days, allowing both local and visiting merchants to maximize attendance and trade. Town authorities often granted special charters to host these fairs, outlining the duration, location, and conditions under which trade could occur. Such charters were legal instruments that defined the rights of the town and its officials, provided protection to merchants, and ensured that taxes or tolls could be levied on both permanent residents and visiting traders. A surge of foreign traders. Unlike local markets, which primarily served the surrounding town and countryside, travelling fairs attracted merchants from afar. Flanders, Italy, the Rhineland, and even more distant regions could be represented, bringing silk, spices, wines, and other luxury items that were otherwise rare in the local marketplace. These traders often travelled in caravans, transporting bales of cloth, barrels of wine, crates of dried fruits, or casks of exotic spices. Horses and oxen laden with goods added to the bustling, chaotic energy of the fair, and their arrival signalled a temporary yet dramatic expansion of the town's commercial world. For many townsfolk, these fairs were the only opportunity to encounter foreign products, new fashions, and unfamiliar culinary delights. Stalls, structures, and layout. The layout of a travelling fair resembled a city within a city. Town squares and streets were crowded with temporary stalls, tents, and wooden booths. Merchants often competed for the best locations, with proximity to the town gates or central thoroughfares considered highly advantageous. Nobles, guilds, and influential merchants might secure prime spots through pre-arranged agreements, while itinerant vendors often had to find space at the periphery. Each stall became a carefully curated display, showcasing goods to entice buyers who had travelled many miles, often at great expense and effort, to attend the fair. Goods on display. The diversity of goods at travelling fairs surpassed that of everyday markets. Fine cloths, tapestries, and furs were displayed alongside metalwork, pottery, and tools. Exotic spices, cinnamon, pepper, cloves, filled the air with unfamiliar aromas, while imported wines and spirits offered a taste of distant lands. In addition to luxury goods, practical items such as iron tools, leather boots, and everyday wares ensured that the fair remained relevant to both wealthy and modest customers. For many artisans and farmers, the fair presented the opportunity to buy or sell in bulk, taking advantage of the concentration of buyers who had travelled great distances. Trade of animals and specialised commodities. Travelling fairs often specialised in certain categories of trade that could not be accommodated by local markets. Horses, cattle, sheep, and other livestock were commonly traded in open fields adjacent to the town, with buyers carefully inspecting animals before purchase. Specialised goods, fine wines, rare seeds, or imported fruits were also more prevalent, often requiring careful negotiation and knowledge of distant markets. This convergence of buyers and sellers allowed for transactions that could significantly impact local economies, making traveling fairs critical nodes in regional and international trade networks. Cultural exchange and entertainment. The fairs were not solely about commerce. They were occasions for cultural exchange and entertainment, providing a space where music, performance, and spectacle flourished. Jugglers, acrobats, storytellers, and musicians traveled alongside merchants, performing in open areas or at temporary stages. Plays or moral dramas sometimes accompanied fairs, drawing crowds eager for amusement after long days of trade. Food vendors offered delicacies and street fare, from roasted meats to sweet pastries, turning the fair into a multi-sensory experience that combined the practical with the festive. For townspeople accustomed to routine market days, the fair represented a temporary lifting of the everyday, a glimpse of a wider, more cosmopolitan world. Regulation and official oversight. Despite their festive nature, traveling fairs were subject to regulation. Town authorities, sometimes with the support of visiting officials, oversaw the collection of tolls, stall fees, and taxes, as well as the enforcement of quality and fairness in trade. Market inspectors monitored weights and measures, ensuring that even foreign merchants adhered to local standards. Security was also a concern, as the influx of visitors and the transport of valuable goods presented opportunities for theft or conflict. Officials maintained order through patrols, designated inspection points, and sometimes the deployment of hired guards, ensuring that the fair could proceed safely and profitably for both towns and merchants. Economic significance. The impact of traveling fairs extended far beyond the temporary influx of buyers and sellers. They stimulated local economies by attracting accommodation providers, food vendors, and transport services. Inns and taverns filled to capacity. Stabling facilities were in constant use, and local craftsmen found new markets for their goods. The fair provided a critical platform for both small-scale and large-scale traders, enabling the exchange of capital, goods, and knowledge over distances that would otherwise remain economically challenging. In essence, traveling fairs were engines of commerce, cultural interaction, and regional integration, linking distant communities through the shared language of trade. Social and political dimensions. Beyond economics, traveling fairs carried social and political significance. The presence of foreign merchants and visiting officials reflected broader networks of influence, diplomacy, and negotiation. Fairs offered opportunities for towns to demonstrate wealth, hospitality, and organizational capacity, reinforcing their status within regional hierarchies. For visiting nobles or wealthy merchants, the fair provided a platform to display wealth, negotiate alliances, and acquire resources that could enhance prestige or consolidate power. Thus, fairs were arenas in which social, political, and economic ambitions intersected. Challenges and risks. Despite their allure, traveling fairs presented challenges. The concentration of people and goods could strain town infrastructure, leading to sanitation issues, crowding, or temporary shortages. The risk of disease, theft, or fire was higher than in routine markets, requiring vigilance from both officials and merchants. Negotiating fair prices in the midst of so much activity could also be complex, with cultural differences, language barriers, and variable standards of measurement, all contributing to potential misunderstandings. Merchants and townspeople alike navigated these risks with a mix of experience, local knowledge, and cautious optimism. A living memory of the wider world. Ultimately, traveling fairs were windows onto a broader medieval world. For townspeople who rarely left their region, the fair provided a glimpse of distant lands through goods, accents, and stories brought by foreign traders. The sights, smells, and sounds of these events expanded horizons, offering not just material wealth, but cultural enrichment. They underscored the interconnectedness of medieval Europe, where commerce, travel, and information flowed along roads, rivers, and maritime routes, linking communities and shaping lives in ways both immediate and long-lasting. Legacy and continuity. The tradition of traveling fairs endured across centuries, adapting to changing economic and political landscapes. They influenced urban planning, trade networks, and even social customs, leaving an imprint on the structure of medieval towns and the rhythms of communal life. Their legacy can be traced to modern fairs, markets, and festivals, which continue to blend commerce, entertainment, and social interaction in ways reminiscent of these historic gatherings. In their combination of trade, spectacle, and social congregation, traveling fairs epitomize the vitality and complexity of medieval economic life. In summary, the great annual fairs represented the apex of medieval marketplace experience, combining commercial opportunity, cultural exchange, and social spectacle. They drew merchants and buyers from near and far, showcased exotic and local goods alike, and created temporary yet extraordinary urban landscapes. With careful oversight, rich diversity, and vibrant entertainment, traveling fairs transformed ordinary towns into hubs of regional significance, leaving lasting impressions on the economy, culture, and collective memory of medieval society. To walk through such a fair was to step into a world where trade, travel, and celebration intertwined, where distant lands could be glimpsed in a single day, and where the marketplace became, for a fleeting moment, the center of a larger, interconnected medieval world. Chapter 10. Closing the market. Evening in the medieval town. As the day waned and the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, the lively energy of the medieval market gradually softened into a more measured, contemplative rhythm. The bustling streets that had echoed with the clamor of merchants, the chatter of townspeople, and the braying of animals were now suffused with a gentler, fading hum. The early morning vitality, so full of anticipation and movement, had left traces in every corner of the square. Overturned baskets, scraps of straw, the lingering aroma of fresh bread, roasted meat, and fragrant spices. This was the hour when the market, having served as the lifeblood of the town throughout the day, began to draw in on itself, closing the chapter of its daily commerce while leaving behind an atmosphere heavy with memory and quiet expectation of tomorrow. Merchants moved with practiced deliberation, gathering their wares with care, aware that a hasty or careless motion might undo the day's hard work. The baker wrapped up the remaining loaves, ensuring that each one was protected from the cool evening air and stray animals, while meat sellers cleaned their counters and carefully covered the remnants of their cuts. Cloth merchants rolled up their vibrant fabrics with the same care that had guided them through the morning, mindful of the dew that might settle overnight and the delicate textures that would draw buyers the next day. Spice vendors transferred their precious powders and dried herbs into secure sacks and jars, preserving both scent and quality. Every gesture was slow, almost ritualistic, a testament to the intimate knowledge of routine that generations of market life had instilled. There was a quiet pride in these movements, a shared understanding among merchants that the market's vitality depended as much on careful closure as it had on the exuberance of its opening. The townspeople and visitors too began to drift away, farmers with emptied baskets and families laden with goods retraced their steps toward homes tucked into winding alleys. Travelers and itinerant merchants sought lodging in inns, guest houses, or temporary accommodations within the town's walls, their tired bodies grateful for the warmth of fires and the comfort of familiar or makeshift beds. The departure of these figures gradually transformed the streets. Where moments earlier there had been a pressing density of bodies, horses and carts, there was now space for the subtle echoes of footsteps and the occasional clatter of a cartwheel rolling over cobblestones. Conversations, once boisterous and urgent with negotiation, softened to murmurs as neighbors exchanged final greetings, recounting brief stories of the day or promising to meet again at the next market. The sensory landscape of the town shifted alongside its population. The raucous calls of merchants and street performers gave way to the more subdued sounds of evening. The distant murmur of conversations in taverns, the lowing of cattle being led to pens, and the rustle of straw and leaves carried on the wind. The odours, too, changed. Where once the mingling scent of fresh bread, frying meat, and dried herbs had dominated, now the air held the earthy aroma of damp cobblestones, the faint smoke of hearth fires being stoked for evening meals, and the subtle perfume of fermenting ale and wine in barrels. This transformation was gentle, almost imperceptible at first, but it marked the town's movement from the frenetic energy of daily commerce to the calm, reflective pace of night. Market officials lingered, ensuring the proper conclusion of trading and the security of the town. They walked among the fading stalls, checking that wares were covered, that streets were unobstructed, and that taxes or fees had been properly accounted for. Town guards patrolled the edges of the square and the gates, their presence both reassuring and a subtle reminder that order was maintained even as the day ended. Meanwhile, cleaners and helpers moved through the empty spaces, sweeping away discarded straw and remnants of food, carrying refuse to designated pits or outside the walls, and replenishing water in public fountains. Their labour, often unnoticed, prepared the square for the next day, maintaining the delicate balance of hygiene, safety, and readiness that allowed the market to thrive continuously. As the shadows lengthened, the market square itself transformed into a place of quiet reflection. The wooden stalls, now empty, cast long, flickering shadows across the cobblestones, illuminated only by the soft glow of lanterns or the final rays of the sun. Empty baskets, folded fabrics, and stacked barrels stood as silent witnesses to the day's transactions, each object carrying its own story of labor, negotiation, and occasional triumph. The streets, once a chaotic weave of movement and sound, became corridors of light and shadow, where one could walk in relative solitude, hearing only the distant noises of evening life or the occasional stray animal moving through the square. In this hour, the town felt both abandoned and deeply alive, a place suspended between the intensity of day and the restorative calm of night. Even as the market emptied, life continued to flow along its periphery. Taverns and inns hosted quieter gatherings where merchants and townspeople alike exchanged news, recounted deals, and shared stories of travel or family. Musicians might play for these smaller evening audiences, their melodies more subdued but no less evocative than the street performances of the day. Ale and wine flowed, sustaining conversation and camaraderie in a more intimate, reflective space. The market's energy, while no longer immediate or overt, persisted in these interactions, a soft echo that lingered even as the physical square lay quiet. Beyond the marketplace, the town adjusted to evening. Residences glowed with the warm light of hearth fires. and the scent of cooking meals drifted through the winding alleys. Children's laughter, now subdued, could be heard as families settled into routine, and the occasional tolling of church bells marked vespers or evening prayers. This interplay of domestic, religious, and social rhythms reinforced the market's role as a central hub. Even in its absence, it structured the life of the town, shaping the movements and routines of all who lived there. The cyclical nature of medieval urban life became apparent, a rhythm of work, closure, reflection, and preparation that repeated day after day, week after week, season after season. Closing time at the medieval market was thus more than a practical necessity. It was a moment of collective reflection, a pause in the life of the town that allowed both merchants and townspeople to take stock of the day's work, to plan for the future, and to transition from the outward-facing activity of trade to the inward-facing life of home and rest. The square, though empty of people, remained alive in memory and anticipation. Each cobblestone, stall, and barrel a reminder of the market's enduring vitality. In the quiet of evening, the town rested but did not sleep entirely. The promise of the next day's commerce, conversation, and community lingered, an ever-present heartbeat beneath the calm surface. By the time darkness fully settled over the town, the market square was transformed. Torches flickered in the gentle breeze, casting long shadows and illuminating the remnants of a day's labor. The market's clamor had disappeared, yet the square retained a latent energy, as if the memory of every transaction, every negotiation, and every human interaction remained embedded in its stones and structures. The town itself, from the quiet residential streets to the still active taverns, moved in harmony with this transition, honoring the rhythm of human activity and the natural world alike. In this way, evening in the medieval market was not an ending, but a continuation, an essential part of a cycle that intertwined commerce, community, and culture. It was a time of reflection, preparation, and subtle transformation, where the energy of the day gradually subsided into calm, yet remained poised to return with the first light of dawn. The empty stalls, the faint echoes of conversation, the lingering sense of food and spices, all spoke to the market's central role in the life of the town, a role that extended far beyond mere trade. The market was the town's heart, and even in its closure it pulsed quietly, a testament to the resilience, rhythm, and enduring vitality of medieval urban life. Conclusion: the market as the beating heart of medieval life. The medieval market was far more than a place of commerce. It was the beating heart of the town, a central hub around which daily life revolved. From dawn, when the first light brushed the rooftops and the smell of baking bread mingled with the cool morning air, to evening, when empty stalls cast long shadows and the echoes of footsteps faded, the market orchestrated the flow of human activity, shaping experiences, interactions, and the rhythms of the community. Here, goods were exchanged: bread, meat, ale, spices, and fabrics, but so were stories, news, and culture. Every transaction reflected not just economic necessity, but trust, skill, and social connection. The calls of merchants, the laughter of children, the music of street performers, all combined to create a living tapestry, vibrant and ever-changing, yet rooted in continuity. The market was a teacher of patience, resilience, and the art of living within a structured yet dynamic environment. It was a place of celebration, ritual, and spectacle, where fairs brought travelers, exotic goods, and entertainment from distant lands. At the same time, regulations and oversight ensured fairness, reliability, and civic order. The market shaped social relationships, offering opportunities for reputation and influence while reflecting broader societal hierarchies. It connected the practical and the celebratory, the domestic and the public, the individual and the community, weaving together the many threads of medieval life into a coherent, living whole. In its sights, sounds and rhythms, the market remained the heartbeat of the town, where human endeavor, culture, and connection converged. And now, as we leave behind the bustling streets and quieting stalls, we take with us the echoes of the day, the smell of fresh bread, the laughter of children, the distant calls of merchants, and carry them into the quiet of the evening. May the memory of this medieval marketplace, with all its life and warmth, accompany you as you drift toward rest. Good night, and may your dreams wander gently through the winding streets of history.